Shall we start?
Yeah, I think we're ready. Yeah.
Sure. Hello all. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to you all. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, Interrogating Governance and Financial Implications of Smart Cities, organized by Environmental Support Group and Center for Financial Accountability in collaboration with Program on Science, Technology and Society of Harvard Kennedy School, USA, and Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research, Germany, as part of the project Governance of Socio-Technical Transformations. This webinar has two parts. Today we will discuss governance implications of Smart City Mission. And on 19th, same time, we will discuss financial implications of Smart City Mission and its impact on urban futures. Why are we holding the webinar? While too little details are available for an informed public debate on Smart City Mission, there's a lot of euphoria around it. Notwithstanding the fact that only less than 10% of the urban area is covered under smart cities as area-based development plans, it is promoted and propagated as a panacea for all the problems related to urbanization. If you look at the past 5 years of Smart City Mission, far from mitigating poverty, by forced evictions, it pushed more people into poverty. It attempts to create small islands of prosperity, leaving behind vast majority of the city to settle with what is left of the resources. It undermines democracy and promotes a governance model devoid of accountability to any democratic institutions. Deliberately or not, a lot of information and details are withheld from the public, which can facilitate a public debate. As in the case of other developmental projects, Smart City Mission is also promoted behind the din and dust of propaganda and often misleading, misleading information. In smart cities, not just corporations pushing ahead their business interests in technology, telecommunications, construction, software, and hardware, but even financial institutions, both national and international, have immense interest. These projects and designs are not developed as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat, but is promoted and thrusted upon us by institutions like World Bank, whose interests are beyond just investing money in these projects. Smart cities are being so heavily invested in due to the popular technocratic belief that smart technology and data analysis will solve most of the city's problems. Smart City Mission allows private corporations to play a larger role in urban development while also allowing private companies to diversify their assets. International financial institutions expound that the private sector is the solution to cities' problems and further claim that public-private partnerships are the most efficient model for implementing such large-scale development models. These investments not only support specific projects, but also push policy recommendations to radically change the regulatory framework and governance of urban infrastructure. What are the governance challenges this Smart City Mission is posing? How does it undermine the democratic governance system of the country? How does it promote lack of democratic and financial accountability? What are the international experiences around it? How does it impact the federal character of the Indian polity, with states losing power to shape the regional visions of urbanization? To discuss this and more, we have an eminent panel today, bringing in wisdom and experience from diverse backgrounds, from the corridors of power to civil society, academics, and ground-level researchers. I'll introduce them one by one when their turn comes to speak. Before I invite the first speaker, some ground rules. To ensure the smooth running of the session, mic is muted for all participants. If you have questions or comments, please post in the chat box and it will be taken as time allows. The session is streamed live on ESG's Facebook and is also tweeted live. Please feel free to share and retweet them and invite your friends to join. I request all speakers to stick to time so that we will have enough time for the question answer and discussions at the end. We are also very happy that Dr. Sheila Janzov has also kind of joined us Most of you know Dr. Jansov. She has founded and directs the program on science, technology, and society at John F. Kennedy School of Governance in Harvard University. Welcome, Sheila. With that, let me invite Mr. Leo Saldana to speak on the smart cities argument with India's constitutional mandate for urban governance. Leo Saldana is the coordinator and trustee of Environment Support Group. He has gained wide-ranging experience in the areas of environmental law and policy, decentralization, urban planning, and a variety of human rights and development-related issues, working across many sectors for over the past many decades. He is a keen campaigner on critical environmental and social justice issues and has guided several campaigns demanding evolution of progressive laws and effective action. He has creatively supported various distressed communities to secure justice through public interest litigations and advocacy efforts. Arguing as party in person in several public interest litigations, many of them have resulted in remarkable judgments. With that, over to you, Leo.
Leo, you have to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Bhargavi. Thank you all. Thank you, Joe. And thanks everyone for joining in. And sincerely appreciate that you have made time when you'd rather be in the comfort of your home in the evenings on a topic which I think all of us should be extremely, all of us would definitely be extremely interested in, but also equally extremely concerned about, particularly given the fact that we are now living in times when the city has become the center of massive explosion of a disease for which we don't know, we don't really have an appropriate response. Politically, there has been all sorts of efforts to overwhelm the public at large, the vulnerable groups in particular, in terms of how the pandemic has been handled, especially in urban centers. And now we in India are waking up to the fact that it is spreading across the rural areas. Now, in that context, when we look at the process of urbanization in India, we, of course, know we experience it every day, and we also know from multiple studies the challenges that there are of urbanization. So one of the critical issues that we have is how do we govern ourselves? How do we look into the future? How do we understand what that future is? And who defines those futures? Do we have a part in defining those futures, or are we just co-travelers? These are some of the questions that keep coming up every time we meet, small groups of people in different forums. And when there are questions raised, you realize that these questions come from a particular perception of why am I not, considered intelligent enough to participate in the decision? And then you realize that there are embedded conflicts in the decision, and then they become discontents, and the processes in which those discontents are addressed necessarily have to be democratic, but are rarely the case. As a result, it manifests itself in the state of our urban forms and urban structures, and also urban governance. And this webinar series really is an attempt to try and grapple with those complexities, but from a perspective where we look at the overwhelming attention that there is now on smart cities. Now, I have been working with cities for at least urban governance for at least 25, 30 years now. And when I look back at the early 90s, those were the days of extraordinary imagination, of inclusivity, of reaching out to the vulnerable, to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, as we would call them in India, to try and make cities accommodate the needs of the poor, while also ensuring that the middle classes and the rich do not feel the discomfiture that was felt, as was widely called the license Raj era. So the early 90s was a process when liberalization promoted a form of idea of urbanization, of inclusivity. So how did smart cities fit into that? That's one of the questions I'm going to address. And I will try to share my screen, I hope it works, in which I have a few slides to share to look at the various imaginaries that have evolved over time about what we mean by smart cities. Yeah, please let me know, Joe, if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah,
Can you please make it slightly bigger?
yeah,
Zoom,
trying to do that.
can you zoom the screen?
I'm trying to, yeah, just give me a moment. I have to rearrange the title.
Yeah,
Is it full screen?
not that. Yes, now it is.
Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you. So as you can see, my topic is really to try and see if smart cities as an argument with India's constitution at a larger meta level, but in particular with regard to the constitutional mandate for decentralized urban governance. So in 1992, the constitution was amended twice. The 73rd amendment was to ensure that rural local governments, which did not have a constitutional status, got it. So as part of the third tier of governance, and also alongside, we also had the 74th Amendment, which is known as the Nagar Palika Act, and Nagar as city and Palika as governance. So it essentially means City Governance Act. So it was a watershed moment in the constitutional history of India, and also particularly for urban areas, because for the longest period, cities had always been governed in a way that if the state did not like the party in power in the city, it could dissolve the government, and then it went on and on for decades. And the result was cities were victims of centralized rule by state, and in effect also by the center. There was times when the Prime Minister's office was directly involved in deciding who governs which city, and whether it has to be governed by the local governments at all, or directly by the state. So to escape that situation, which had essentially destroyed the quality of governance that could have been possible in urban areas, especially the way in which people could have a direct involvement in that governance, the 74th amendment was brought in. So a little later, I will explain the basic features of it for those of our friends who may not be familiar, but also to highlight the type of shift that has taken place. But first, let me take you through what this idea of smart cities really means. So as we know, this is the graph which we are very familiar now. We have crossed into the age of urbanization, and that really means that we have to think about how concentrated populations will live in the coming century, and what that means to public health, to education, to economics of the poor, vulnerable, as well as middle class and the rich. And most importantly, how do we find an harmonious way to govern these populations which are highly concentrated in cities, particularly in times when tolerance is not the virtue of politics, and more importantly, politics is shaped by majoritarian views. So these are very critical challenges. And then, of course, we have the challenges of global warming, and we also have the challenges of the consequences of it. One of which could be the fact that we also have diseases which will spread and which will disrupt fundamentally our lives, especially in concentrated, where people live in highly concentrated, congested neighborhoods. Now, the idea of smart city is evolving from the idea of the word smart. Now, when I look up the dictionary, I really have a problem understanding why we chose smart cities. We could have chosen inclusive cities. We could have chosen progressive cities, but we choose the idea of being smart. So the word itself doesn't lend very much to giving us a sense of confidence in how we are governed, because it really means one is quick-witted and shrewd and astute, and that's good enough. Is that the world we are moving into? And also, it also means one who is fashionable and elegant and neat and so on. So where does this word take us? So if you actually look at the different types of projections of this idea, for the Prime Minister, it is really not so much the words, but he is basically looking at how India's rapid growth and its challenges and opportunities have to be taken advantage of so that we can promote economic growth. And he also says we need to strengthen governance and improve results for urban residents. This is a quote from the Smart City website of the Prime Minister from 2015. whereas at that time, our finance minister was Arun Jaitely. He came up with a slightly more uh, uh, expansive definition of the smart cities. He said it is about the fruits of development reaching increasingly large number of people, and he also acknowledged the migration from rural areas to cities is increasing, and particularly that a new middle class which is emerging as aspirations, and unless we build cities that can accommodate the burgeoning number of people, as he put it. That means, I guess, in his imagination, it was not just those who can afford to be there, but also those who will be accommodated to be there. So, he, of course, acknowledged existing cities would soon become unlivable. And therefore, the idea of the 100 smart cities. I guess we have a certain fascination for the number 100. It could have been 50, it could have been 96, it could have been 300 maybe. But the more important thing is they were supposed to be satellite towns of larger cities, and also the modernization of mid-sized cities. Now, there has been a long debate in India about the mid-sized cities being neglected, and so as a result, our metropolitan areas have expanded beyond capacity and the capabilities of public administration. And though for decades we have focused on that, we have not really managed to get there and get it fixed. Most of our mid-sized towns are in a pathetic condition, if I may say that, very rare exceptions, of course. So this neglect was to be addressed. Now, there was also the other part of it, that the GDP, urban share of GDP in India has predominantly become what it is you see in the graph. And so the shift is also in politics, that we now understand, for instance, Bangalore has 28 members of Legislative Assembly for the size of the city as well as its population. So it has a major, it is a major power player in the legislature of the state. So it's not just about the GDP shifting to becoming predominantly generated from urban areas, but it's also political capital and political power that shifts when this happens. Now, when you look at the early days of what smart cities meant, this is a quote from one of the early minutes of the smart city. I thought there was a lot of confusion which is embedded in this language, but I'll just highlight for you that the Secretary of Urban Development, Government of India, meant that it would be a collegiate system of urban local bodies and state level. And it would be, in the proposed monopolistic situation will not arise. He was very clear that it would not be a didactic system. But when a question was asked to the secretary, he said there are different categories of ICT, that is Internet, Communication and Technology, based on the category of city. So you can see that the pitch was really to make sure that it would be technology-based promotion of smart cities, and rather than many other forms that could have been. And of course, words like creation of open forum, project management unit, which is a very often used term for corporate-driven management. And it acknowledged that the earlier precursor of this was the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, which was promoted during the UPA 1. So the whole idea seems to be that it will be run on a technology-backed project monitoring unit mode. So it's not that there was a clear idea, but it would evolve, right? Now, for the people of the city of Ajmer, what was smart cities? You know, this is from a couple of years ago, and the interesting quote here is, while we are trying to bring 21st century technology, we also need to sort out some 19th century challenges in Ajmer. So, you know, this is the kind of contradiction, the conflict, and also as a result, contestation that will take place in every city, because all cities are in different centuries. They're not in the same century as we would wish. And therefore, while many cities, almost all cities, are struggling to provide basic services like sanitation, health, good roads, secure power, and so on, there is this, niche population which has an ambition which is way beyond the general population. So they, for instance, would like IBM and Oracle and several other companies to be part of constructing the imagination of a future city, which can somehow manage to somehow struggle and work within the existing city, and both would be somehow successful. But the interesting part here is that whether they understood or not, whether they were asked if they understood or not, Ajmer's city residents had already put up a billboard declaring that they are a smart city. However, somebody said, can we first work towards becoming a functioning city before aspiring to be a smart city? Now, these are non-trivial aspects, because to not have a functional city, but yet move towards an idea which we don't quite understand, but we are anyway willing to risk investing in. This is the point that has come up. And as you can see that most of this, you may not be able to read it. Let me read out. The India Smart Cities Challenge is a competition designed to inspire and support municipal officials as they develop smart proposals to improve residents' lives. So the construction very clearly in the Indian government's mind is that we are looking to secure the support of municipal officials, not elected representatives, not the people of the cities, but the municipal officials who in any case are employees of the state, not so much the local government in most metropolitan areas, and therefore their visions will become the visions for the Smart City Challenge. And almost all the big consulting groups from across the world found it very interesting because they were facilitated by the Prime Minister's office, by the Ministry of Urban Development, and almost all urban development departments across the states were asked to ensure Deloitte or Bloomberg or every major corporate firm that was interested would be facilitated in engaging with this process. Now, there is a guideline that has been posted online, and it basically says that it's got to have an entrepreneurial spirit to it because entrepreneurs themselves look for a decent living, and so they also look for smart housing, high level of healthcare, entertainment, and quality education. So the language very clearly in this document is about that class of people, and it has to run efficiently without any bureaucratic hassles, and it has to be citizen-centric and investor-friendly. Now, when you obviously put citizen-centric and investor-friendly together, I'm sure that we'll all agree that the investor-citizen is more interesting to the idea than is the general citizen. Now, Jairam Ramesh has been recently writing about what this means, what this kind of urbanization does to India. And he has said that we have to really move from what we call the gross development product to the green development product. And he has been very clear that the current phase of developmentism, as if I may use the word, is not going to help us at all. It is catastrophic. So he has really urged the country to engage with the idea of moving away from this very economic sense of progress to a much more wider understanding of what progress should mean. And I will skip this slide because it basically looks at the carbon emissions, and the mission statements have been put out. They have not been changed since June 2015. So there has not been too much of an evolution of what this idea means. And basically, it's also about how projects are imagined. It's about water supply, assured electricity, and if you skip down, it's about IT connectivity and digitalization. Good governance means e-governance. What about people just meeting under a tree, for instance, and having an argument and coming up with projects? I don't know if it's possible under this. And safety and security, all this is listed there. But essentially, the mobility is about what? That is one of the questions that I think in a later presentation we'll see more, so I won't press on that. But the important aspect here is, what are the strategic components? It is about area-based development in the whole scheme of things. So it is retrofitting city improvement. It is redevelopment of particular areas. It is greenfield development, that is city extension, which means the basic city is not really addressed. The problems or the challenges or the opportunities of basic city do not seem to have so much of a thrust in this scheme. And the Pan City initiative, as it is used, means that some projects are selected because they have wider benefits across the city. This is an illustration. You can find it online. I won't dwell on it, but you can just quickly look at the terms used, and you will understand what kind of the visual itself is quite illustrative of the type of imagination that is promoted. The basic thrust of smart cities is that you will not be constrained by the constitutional 74th Amendment, the Nagar Palika Act. The project is nested within what is called the Smart City private unit, which is created as a special purpose vehicle, and then it will be run as a corporate organization. And so the revenue stream is made available to SPV so as to make it self-sustainable and could evolve on its own credit worthiness for raising additional resources from the market. So it's basically a business. It's not a city. So it's a project which has money coming in, it does things, and that money will be having a higher return on investment, and it's successful therefore, and thereby it is smart. That's broadly what it is. And there is a online, if you go to the website, you will find that this language is there, that not the city government, but the smart city development project will approve and sanction projects, including their technical. So it's like one being a judge in one's own cause. That one sets up oneself, one promotes projects, one reviews the project, and one applies for funds and gets it and raises money in the market. So there is a complete operational freedom, therefore, no constraints whatsoever from the local governments. Now the question is this: who does it speak for? And there's been a very interesting debate that's going on in EPW, and I just put one of the images which has come there. Does it speak for this situation which happened just weeks ago? And it's been happening across the cities of India, major cities of India. These images are representative, but it's happening every year. So where do we go if this is how our cities sink, especially those which are 1,000 meters above sea level like Bangalore is? This is the state of Bangalore as of last week. We have the investment in the metro, and then we have this situation almost across the city. So how do you get out of this if our urban governance is not really understanding the complexities of city management from a ground up situation? Or for instance, this was a situation in Delhi exactly this time last year. These are bodies, living bodies, sleeping, huddled in this way. Now, why is there no smart city focus for them, for instance, right? So this is one of the questions that comes to our mind. And in this context, we have to see the 74th Amendment. If you actually try and look at the language which is there, we had a problem of supersession. We have talked about that before, the problem of devolution of power, but really the thrust of the 74th Amendment was to ensure local governments became vibrant democratic units of self-government. So when you're saying self-government, is it possible when you have a smart city model, which is a corporate, which is directed by the center and some state departments, and based on a market-friendly approach? How do we then look at putting on a firmer footing the relationship between state government and urban local bodies? Smart cities actually ensure that the projects are governed directly by the center, almost totally bypassing the state governments. So how do you look at federated sharing of power? What happens to the State Finance Commission? I know Tikendra is going to address that later, so I won't dwell on it. More importantly, what happens to land use planning, natural resource planning? What happens to urban planning, which is supposed to be done representatively according to the Constitution through district or metropolitan planning committees? How do you look at the environmental laws? How do you look at labor laws? How do you look at natural resource planning laws? Where statutorily it has to be ground up. But none of these are actually even considered in almost all smart city projects. And then what happens to this 12th schedule, which clearly says that this is the mandate of the local governments, which are elected, not selected through a corporate mode. Who takes care of all this for most of the urban population, particularly given that India's urban population is close to 40% of its total. One of the most urbanized regions in the world is India today. And India's population has increased by 5 times since the early 1900s. So it's one of, the growth rate has been very, very high throughout the last 1.5 centuries. And even if it stabilizes, most of the people in India will be living in urban areas very soon. And then what do we do when governance models don't speak for everyone's needs?
Leo?
Yeah, I'm done. This is my last slide. And
Under 1 minute, yeah.
So this is a slide I always like to show, because the constitutional promise is really to ensure that citizens, men and women equally, have the right to an adequate means of livelihood, and that ownership and control of material resources of the community, not of the state, are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. And most importantly, operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. Now, we all know that there has been a disparitous development in the past decade, past 2 decades maybe. Top 1% has so much wealth that it's humongous amount of wealth. It's true in India, it's true across the world, and it doesn't speak well for the ideas of democracy that we all value so much through our constitutional mechanisms. And in that sense, I think smart cities have to be understood as a very big challenge to democracy itself, to constitutionalism itself, because it has essentially sidestepped it. And we have 100 examples. It can be 300 tomorrow. It can be 500 in a few years' time. And then what happens to most of the people who live in cities? And that also means it is a model of development that can easily spread across farming, rural government, health, and the idea of people being involved in decision making. Where will that be? That's the real question that I leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. You can stop the screen share now. Thank you. I mean, you in a short time explained about what does the smart city mean to different people, right from the Prime Minister down to many others. You touched upon the contradiction between the urge to turn cities into smart versus their struggle to fix the 19th century challenges. You also spoke about the perils of GDP-based development model. You spoke about what does smart city mission really entail, and importantly, to whom are the smart cities are designed for. And you touched upon the center-state relationship, and in the context of that, you brought in the 74th Amendment and also the constitutional promise for equitable development. I mean, it was very, very useful intervention. I would like to kind of invite Dr. Chandramohan. I hope he's back. Yeah, I can see you. Hello, sir. He is going to kind of tell us about the experience with smart cities in Tamil Nadu. He is the Principal Secretary of Government of Tamil Nadu. Is a senior civil servant from the Tamil Nadu cadre, has worked extensively in the urban sector and has held positions like Commissioner of Greater Chennai Corporation and Managing Director of Chennai Metro Water. He has always also been the chairman of Chennai Smart City and also mentor for Madurai Smart City. Over to you, sir. I hope you can unmute.
Yeah, good evening, all of you. Good morning to people who are in different time zones. Am I audible? Am I okay?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this gathering. And in the next few minutes, I will sort of take you through this journey of how exactly the process of smart cities came across, what exactly is being done here, and what are some of the common misconceptions that are there about smart cities, and whether they are actually borne out in reality. So this comes from a personal perspective out of the work that I have done over a period of time, both as chairman of the smart city and also as a person who has been involved in the process of conceptualizing the whole paradigm shift from traditional incremental change to a paradigmatic shift in urban governance, which was sought to be brought about through this concept of smart cities. Way back, Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission was a scheme which was the primary engine of urban development for this country. The government of India understood that urbanization is increasing day by day. Cities and, states like Tamil Nadu have a large proportion of their population being urbanized, almost 50%. Many states are getting there. It is also agreed that urban sprawls are engines of growth, will continue to remain magnets for migration to a large number of people. It is also necessary that when so many people are congregating in limited amount of space, it is perhaps mandatory and it is perhaps necessary to provide them with a quality of life that is good, better, and they have access to services at various levels. The approach has been to provide dedicated funds under the Urban Renewal Mission, something like 12,000 crores every year, which was available to cities in the country. Each city was supposed to come up with projects, mostly urban infrastructure projects like water supply, drainage, street lights, roads, solid waste management, and other related aspects. This was going on well for a long time, but the government, the present government, when it first took over the central government way back 7 years ago, wanted some kind of a paradigm shift in the way our urban cities are governed, urban spaces are governed. There was an extensive mechanism of consultation that was done at Government of India level by involving almost all the local bodies, including elected representatives, and also people who were in the bureaucracy that were running this. And also there were people who were facilitating it through international experience elsewhere. There was one particular thought that was sort of debated for extensively, and that was whether we continue to make incremental changes in matters that are currently happening, or we go for a paradigm shift by leveraging important initiatives that have worked well in other parts of the world. One of the things that was a common denominator across different cities in the world that the government found was that technology had been leveraged in a big way to make people's lives better. So for some conclusion and for after a lot of deliberation and discussion, it was felt that technology could be one particular medium or weapon which could help deliver better services, which could improve lives, and which could basically make lives in cities safer. So in a country like India, where a city like Delhi with its population could be compared with maybe 1.5, 2 crore population to a city like Dindigul, which has 15 lakhs, definitely the program realized all a one size fits all would not work. So they came up with this concept of a smart city, which they sought to make a paradigm shift kind of a change, creating islands where they could showcase technology, where they could showcase interventions which could make lives better for the people. How did they go about it? I mean, I'm trying to cut short a long story, but how did they go about it? There was some reference to the planning process as such, where I think there was a mention that only municipal commissioners or municipal bureaucracy were involved in developing plans. That is perhaps not very true. For the first time, in a country which has representative democracy making all the decisions, for the first time, Smart Cities program provided for a platform for people to directly participate in voting for the smart city of their choice. They had the opportunity to suggest which place or which area should be taken, what kind of interventions should be taken up, what are the felt needs of people, what are the most pressing wants or what are the most pressing priorities for people. So in Chennai alone, I remember, I think some 15 to 20 lakh people participated in this whole process of decision making, suggesting to the municipal local body, the Chennai Corporation, which was spearheading this effort, as to what area should be taken up, what should be the priority, and what should be done under the smart cities. So this concept that only officials did this perhaps was not exactly accurate. Officers were involved, they were facilitating, elected representatives were at the forefront of Chennai Corporation, mobilizing people, facilitating people, and every citizen in the city was provided an opportunity to basically suggest, contribute, and decide on what needs to be their smart city and how this smart city needs to look like. The smart city guidelines actually provided for a broad framework that not only gave some strategies, as Leo was mentioning. It could be either of the 3 or 4 approaches that was left to the city corporation or the city municipality to decide which one they would follow. Whether they would follow one or a combination of many, that was left to them. But one amazing thing that has happened is, if you see the smart city plans of cities in India, no 2 cities will be the same. Each city, according to its requirement, according to its felt need, according to its unique geographical and historical position and priorities, has conceptualized their own smart city plans in a manner that is most acceptable to them and in a manner that is most necessary for them. In Chennai, for example, the city was conceptualized. Yeah, before I go into Chennai per se, there is this one important issue that is being raised time and again. The smart city concept borrows from many models of institutions that are not necessarily originally belonging to governance space in India. One of these is something like a special purpose vehicle which would run the smart city. The way we have sort of married this institutional flexibility with institutional accountability to Chennai Corporation or any other corporation is simply like this. Tamil Nadu is fully conscious that the mandate for governance and the constitutional mandate lies with the local body. And the Chennai Smart City is a body formed by the Chennai City Corporation. Similarly, with all other cities also. We have, I think, about 12 smart cities in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, and almost all of them follow the same structure. The smart city SPVs are the creation of the local bodies. This is not a new innovation. In the past also, for sake of institutional flexibility, we have created many such institutions. Initially, if you see, there was what is called a tuberculosis society. It used to be an AIDS control society. In many places, for monetization of some assets, we have had a land development authority or something like that. In this case, the only institutional innovation was that this turned out to be a company instead of a society. But it is again a company which is owned, monitored and directed by the Chennai Corporation, by the elected local body. So this is something which Tamil Nadu took a conscious decision so that the accountability of the SPV will be towards the local body and its elected representatives, in a way trying to marry the flexibility of the institution and also providing for accountability with the local body. So that part of it has been taken care of. The second thing is, when we talk about the kind of initiatives that have been taken place in Chennai, the first thing anybody would think of Chennai is it's a water stressed district, often in the throes of problems. And one important thing which most urban sprawls are seeing is that water bodies are slowly losing ground, and sometimes they are being diverted. Tamil Nadu again has a dramatic history in terms of putting a stop to this. They have brought out very stringent regulations about how to preserve water bodies. And Chennai Smart City made one of its agenda to restore and rejuvenate the water bodies in the city. This was one of the prime agendas of Chennai Smart City. The second thing which basically happened is, when we talk about an intelligent transport system, what are we talking about? We are not necessarily talking about only facilities and enablements for motorized transport. Chennai Corporation has for the first time brought about a non-motorized transport policy, which was pioneered in Chennai Corporation even before the smart city came into being. This was internationally awarded and also later went on to become the focus or the nucleus of a NMT policy for the entire state, which the government has now issued. This speaks and ensures common standards for pedestrianization, common standards of footpaths, what width, how much, everything. And it lays down a series of facilities for people who are using non-motorized transport to be able to claim their due share in the transport space. That is number one. And number two, we have also we are in the process of strengthening a combined, it's called KUMTA, an Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, where a integrated transport plan has been readied for the city of Chennai, which integrates multimodal transport, including metro, MRTS, bus, local rail, and also air services. So the point I'm trying to make is, smart city turns out to be a framework which brings ad hocism to a full stop and starts people, sets them thinking about a systemic solution, about a technology-led solution to bring everything together, to focus on the multi problems that the city people are facing, city institutions are facing, gives it some kind of impetus to build new systems, build new interventions, and come up with new projects which can overcome these difficulties. So what exactly did we do as part of Chennai Smart City? The first thing that we did was, almost energy efficiency became a credo. Almost one more thing that Chennai did very intelligently was, though area-based development as a strategy was essential, it did take up area-based development as per the smart city mandate in a particular area called T Nagar. But the focus of the smart city was to give more and more services on a pan city model so that more and more areas benefit from the interventions that actually happen in the smart city. The first thing when it came to energy conservation was almost all tube lights from sodium vapor and other kinds of technology were converted into LED lights. A detailed analysis of the kind of savings that this has brought about has ensured that these savings have paid for the increased cost in LED lights over a period of time. If I remember correctly, I think the payback period is about 6 to 7 years, and the investment has been recovered just by the savings that have come about by replacement of better technology. One of the important things that we have currently done is to provide for an integrated grievance redressal system that brings together multiple stakeholders providing services to the city. This integrated grievance redressal system, in fact, goes through various, it can be a call center kind of a system. It is also an app-based system. So basically it brings together different service providers and also ensures that these people are able to provide services and grievance redressal in a very time-bound manner, in a manner in which the service providers are held accountable, and also if the grievance does not get redressed, it gets upscaled so that somebody who could be in a position to redress that gets to look at it. We also realize that technology will be a transformational force, and it is necessary to integrate this into schools. When we are talking about integration of technology into schools, one of the ways in which this happens is smart classrooms and exposure to IT products and projects and education to schools. While the private schools have had these facilities for some time now, the corporation focused on providing smart city and smart IT solutions to corporation schools which cater to the lowest strata of society. It may be very interesting for us to recall here that in the whole state of Tamil Nadu, corporation schools were the first to start Montessori system of studying and also activity-based learning. We were also the first group of schools which started life skills education in the corporation schools. So these corporation schools are dramatically pioneering in terms of the quality of education and the interventions that have happened over a period of time. And it is here that we have started smart classrooms also to essentially expose and make it more inclusive. I think Leo spoke about inclusive cities, and this is one of the interventions where we were trying to make these schools more inclusive, trying to get people to understand technology. Another important thing is we have identified, previously our concept of greening was only parks and avenue plantations. Now Chennai Corporation has started a concept by developing urban forests in small areas where at least half an acre of land is available. We are using the Miyawaki technique to develop urban forestry very extensively in the city to take up huge greening in the city. That is one initiative. The second initiative is the Adyar estuary, which was in a state of ecological damage, has been over a period of time restored, and it is now a beautiful biodiversity hotspot with lot of species which have come back to the estuarine ecosystem. And the second part of it is also currently under implementation, which is also taking very, very good shape. This is the Adyar ecosystem, and which has been eco-restored. The third part of it is the city is home to a large Palikarnai marshland, which is now also going through a process of eco-restoration, essentially to improve the ecological facilities and ecological value of the city. Of course, the Nanmangalam Reserve Forest and the Gindi National Park are also seeing a lot of traction in terms of how biodiversity is increasing and what they are doing. Stormwater drains in the city were patchy. They were in different places. You must realize that Chennai as a city is actually below sea level in certain pockets. So basically there is a lot of flooding in low-lying areas, and it takes time, especially during high tide season, to water to drain. So what we have done is try and build a network of stormwater drains that is in turn connected to various water bodies like tanks. So this water actually gets drained into tanks and adds to the improved water harvesting in the city. You may recall that Chennai is the first city in the whole country to be able to do rainwater harvesting in all its cities. It is also the first state in the country to make mandatory rainwater harvesting for all buildings as a part of its planning permission approval process. Now the city has gone to the next level, and it is focusing on rejuvenating water bodies and also ensuring that urban stormwater, which is collected through stormwater drains, is connected to these water bodies so that it is appropriately harvested.
Mr. Chandramohan, can I request you to wind up in another couple of minutes, please?
Please tell me how many minutes I can wind up.
A couple of minutes,
Okay.
1 to 2 minutes. Yeah.
Another thing that has really happened in a big way, and which Chennai Corporation is showcasing, is the pedestrianization of Tyagaraya Road. It used to be a business hub. It used to be full of traffic, chock-a-block. Now that entire area, initially the plan was to make it completely pedestrian with no possibility for vehicular traffic. But after a very elaborate process of consultation with the people who are using that pedestrian, with that area, and also the shopkeepers, it was decided that there could be a central road, but the rest of the road will be pedestrianized. So today it is one of the good examples of how a place has actually transformed into a hub of activity. There is good shopping, people come there to relax, people go for walks, people spend time. So that space which was in the throes of commercialization has been taken back to make it a center of activity for people. Similarly, the city is actually taking up an integrated street design exercise throughout the city. Since I have little time, I'll touch upon one last thing before I wind up. The Integrated Command and Control Center actually brings together multiple stakeholders, has various components, one of which is basically the traffic management system. Another is basically a security system which has a network of CCTV cameras. Let me say that the CCTV cameras have made it easier for people to solve crimes in much lesser time. And this technology has had a very uh, improving effect on the kind of traffic management issues that we have been facing. I'm not saying congestion has reduced. I mean, that is still a problem that is being worked on. But a lot of things like signal synchronization, like parking, all those things are actually happening. We have also, I have also already mentioned about water body restoration. Okay. And let me say that basically of the almost 39 projects that were taken up in the smart city, 36 projects that have been shortlisted, 15 projects have been completed, 17 projects are under execution, and 4 projects are still in the process. So it is a good strike rate, and knowing that urban projects are long gestation projects, I would say in conclusion that smart cities as a program is a program that attempts at a paradigm shift in the way urban development and urban governance is happening in this country. It has been our endeavor in Tamil Nadu to build on the past, to reach out to the future, use technology as a bridge, making for better cities, making for inclusive cities, making for better service delivery, and above all, ensuring and enabling urban centers to continue to be engines of economic growth. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandramohan. It was a very useful, and it was very useful to kind of hear you from somebody from the experience of one who was responsible for designing and implementing the kind of project. You mentioned about the paradigm shift from JNURM to Smart City Mission. You said about how participatory the whole process was, involving people and local bodies. Also not taking a one-size-fits-all approach, but adapting to the local realities and the unique efforts undertaken in Chennai in particular. I can already see a few questions. I am very sure that there will be many more questions, and we hope that you will stay with us until the end to kind of address these questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for summarizing the whole thing so well. Thank you. It was nice.
Thank you. I would invite now Ramananda Vangireppam to speak about the app-based smart mobility in Imphal, Manipur. Ramananda is the director of the Forum for Indigenous Perspectives and Action, and his areas of work and interest primarily entails analysis of the impact of huge infrastructure projects, specifically the hydropower sector in the Northeast region of India. Welcome, Ram. Over to you.
Hi, hello everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
So, okay, I first of all, I must say that we don't really work on the smart city program, but we do monitor some of the work, though we don't critically engage with some of the activities happening on smart city. And also the topic which has been given to me, which is on the app-based mobility, that issue that is given, that topic that has been given to me, I might have to go, a bit here and there so that I'm able to kind of communicate what is happening in Imphal which is the capital city of Manipur, where I come from and where I live now. And also because our work also has some work, overlap issues with the kind of work that Joe was talking about with the issue of mobility. So Imphal is part of the Smart City program, and it's about retrofitting 541 acres of the Imphal, the proper core Imphal area. And so what is interesting is that though till date, I was studying the website of the Imphal Smart City, and till date, even after third tenders, there is no taker. There is no CEO. I think they have an ad hoc CEO now. They don't have anybody who's actually, any private party which has taken over the program itself. But the government, through the municipal corporation and the urban department, has taken up portions of the smart city activities. Now, I will focus myself more on the mobility part. The app part is not even actually activated as of now. What has happened is I was part of 3 public hearings on the smart city, particularly related to flyovers, underground passes, footbridges, and the introduction of smart cycles, as they call it, because we also operate as I'm part of the cycle club, currently also the president of the Manipur Cycle Club, and we operate, pay, rent. People can hire cycle from us to move around, particularly in a place called Kangla. And in all the meetings, at least in all the 3 consultation public hearings that was conducted, where I was part of it, where our group was part of it, the women, particularly strong women groups, were part of it, who were part of the market, the main key market, which they talk about with so much of praises, the women market, as they call it, as it is called in English. They have very clearly, and we have clearly also made our submission, both from the cycle club, both from our office, at the same time from the women group, that the flyovers are not required. It's a problem. The underpasses are a problem. And the footbridges are a problem, particularly from the women perspective. People from the market perspective, people who are and we're talking about 3, and for the underpasses particularly, the women markets, which are supposed to be, it's like fully pedestrianized, and cars have become a problem in that area. The vehicles have a problem in that area. Women says we cannot go underneath the earth. We cannot climb the footbridges. We cannot climb the flyovers. Very clearly 100% that it was a no. But now it has completely come back. So in fact, I was wondering in the last presentation, this whole public hearing consultation, in fact, I really feel that there's already been a format where, what are the elements, what are the things to be done. So even if you have a consultation, so it's sort of just a show, as far as what I understand from the Imphal process, that it was more of a show that these big money projects like flyovers, footbridges, several footbridges and several subways, underground passes, as they also call it. So these have very clearly come back as part of the project. In fact, they have started building footbridges where there are no takers there. So what I want to bring here is that they talk a lot about pedestrianization. They talk a lot about NMT, non-motorized transport. But what they actually end up doing is very car-friendly. You know, I consider footbridges as car-friendly projects. Flyovers as car-friendly projects. Under subway are car-friendly projects, vehicle-friendly projects. And this was designed, I think all these elements are designed rather than pedestrianization, rather than making it people friendly or NMT friendly, it has been designed for cars. The smart cities, at least in Imphal, what I understand is that it's designed for vehicles. So the smart city is going to bring that completely not change. I don't see a paradigm change. You know, when I say paradigm change, I know like the problems in Delhi or Chennai or Bangalore. We're talking about places like Imphal, where I think it's really places where NMT can be really given a push. But the smart city program is actually going to bring in a lot more motorization by what is being the design as a smart city. And currently the other element that we're also seeing is bringing in a lot of these malls. Yesterday itself, in my own I live in Imphal, just there are 2 malls that have come up. And yesterday our club, I also represent the local village authority here in this part of Imphal, and the malls have become a problem. The malls, so several malls, the Vishal malls, the India Mart, and so on and so forth. Several of them, they have come up inside the smart city areas, and locals, in fact, yesterday had to close down a mall because it was creating so much of a problem, both during daytime and at nighttime. And so we had to take action. And despite the fact that the deputy commissioner was written, we have sent a letter to her, and no action was taken. So the local people have to actually take action against the mall because it was creating so much of problem for the people. So traffic problem and so on, noise pollution, all of that. So what I see is that the smart city is actually, as I think Leo was talking about, the issue of inclusivity. Imphal is a city where it dates back to, it has been a capital since 3380. So it's been a long history of organic growth. But with this, what is happening with this smart city program, maybe otherwise, even if it was not a smart city, I think the global trend was that all this big investors are taking over cities, which is a concern. But and in fact, smart city is actually pushing this further, hastening the process where the poor people, the marginal people will be I think taken away from the city. It will be pushed out from the city. In fact, I'll give you a classic example of what is known as the e-rickshaw. E-rickshaw is a problem. In fact, there was a big protest by the auto rickshaw drivers, the diesel and the petrol auto rickshaw drivers, when e-rickshaw was being pushed as the only way to do it, only way to there are no public transport as such. I mean, it's not a proper one. So the private auto rickshaws have taken over the city for mobility of people, and the government wanted to push e-rickshaws. So they want to push away the more than 3,500 these diesel rickshaws, and there was a big fight. And for 3 days, there was a shutdown by the auto rickshaw drivers. And this e-rickshaw actually is part of the smart city program. And people, the poor people, I would say the poor people who are running these auto rickshaws, they were forced to, they were kept away from the city. Now, because they were able to kind of protest, 3 days of protest, the whole city was literally on its knees, because without them, you can't run the city. Now, because e-rickshaw, which is considered to be smart, I'm not saying that the diesel auto rickshaws is the answer, is the way. but the way things are handled, the way things are moving is completely against the, the people who are already poor, people who are using that, people who are driving that, people who access the market, people, I'm talking about passengers also. So I think there's a complete rethinking that's required for the kind of smart city ideas or smart city design that is being brought for a place like Imphal. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Joe?
Ram. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, well within the time. Thank you so much. I mean, thank you for bringing the perspectives from the northeast of India. Particularly, it was quite interesting to kind of hear the experience of public hearing in Imphal as against what we heard from Dr. Chandramohan about what was kind of happening in Chennai. It was also very interesting to hear about how, like the World Bank, how Smart City Mission use the deceptive lingo, and you particularly kind of said about the non-motorized transport and the pedestrianization actually when they are promoting the car-friendly ecosystem. Thank you very much, Ram, for that. I would like to kind of invite now Bhargavi Rao to speak on the experiences with smart city development in Tumkur, Karnataka. Bhargavi is a trustee of Environment Support Group and is the Deputy Director at the Center for Financial Accountability. She has co-worked as coordinator and faculty of the India sector of the Cities of the 21st Century and Health and Community courses of the International Honors Program, a study abroad program, and as co-director of the India Center for the Minnesota Studies in International Development, a division of the Learning Abroad Center of University of Minnesota, USA. Apart from this, she was associated with Public Health Foundation of India and as G philanthropic initiatives. Over to you, Bhargavi.
Thank you, Joe. Give me a minute. I'll just share my screen.
Could you also, when you share the screen, could you also switch off the annotations? Because I think earlier somebody was trying to fiddle around with that. You can do it at the options on the top once you share it. So while Bhargavi is setting up her share screen, I also want to kind of remind everybody again that you can put your questions and comments in the chat box and we will kind of take it at the end of the presentations.
Joe, I'm having a little challenge. Maybe we could have Tikender speak and then I can come.
Okay, we will do that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. So can I please invite Mr. Tikender Panwar to speak about the State Finance Commission's role in Smart Cities mission. Mr. Panwar was the elected deputy mayor of Shimla city. Under his leadership, the city has been able to create a vision with a development plan that speaks about inclusive growth, greater planned social infrastructure, and in making not just the city, but citizens resilient. Mr. Panwar was also a member of the National Task Force in the country to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment, which speaks about the decentralized governance. He's supervising the vision document for Leh Town and has contributed towards it. Apart from this, Mr. Panwar has represented the country, the city and the country in many international events. Over to you, Mr. Panwar.
Thank you, Joe. And just tell me how much time do I have, by the way? Because
15 minutes.
Great, thanks. So just alert me when it's 12 so that I just know, because, you know, I'm the lone politician here and you never allow a politician to override. Huh?
I'll do it.
Okay. Please. Well, thank you so much. And I do not know whether I'll be able to do justice with the State Finance Commissions because I was not directly engaged or involved in the State Finance Commission functioning, though we've had, lots of back and forth meetings with the state, and of course the State Finance Commission as far as the rights and the demands of the city governments was concerned. So from that perspective, yes, I will speak a little later. I think the second thing that I wanted to mention right at the inception is that I would also speak about some of the anecdotal experiences that I have while I don't say running the city, but serving a city for 5 years from 2012 to 2017, where I was the directly elected deputy mayor. I think before jumping to the Finance Commission, and since we're talking about smart cities, I think it is important for me to actually build up the whole perspective of the smart cities. And what we have been listening, what Leo actually quite eloquently placed, I mean, the kind of trajectory of growth of the idea of the smart cities. I think what is important for me is to bring out the whole notion of why we have landed into these smart cities, and actually to build this argument from the early 90s when we had the 74th Constitutional Amendment and the 73rd Constitutional Amendment that spoke about state finance commissions as well, more devolution, more decentralized power and all that. But before that, I think and it was pointed out because we just had a review of the 74th Constitutional Amendment a few years ago, where we just observed 25 years of the 74th Amendment. And actually, a few of the observers commented, actually, that's a pertinent comment, and we should not miss that when we speak about the 74th Amendment. And that is actually the early 90s was also a period when we had this transformation taking place in our economy, the so-called paradigm, the economic paradigm shift that we witnessed. And when we integrated more with the world, and when we integrate more with the world means, I mean, we spoke about creative ideas, cities being engines of growth. I don't know how to really place that in an argument, but cities being engines of growth, cities being competitive. I mean, Shanghai competing with Mumbai, and Singapore competing with Bangalore and all that stuff. I don't know how factually that correct is, but at the same time, two important actually changes or shifts were taking place in the political economy. One, I mean, there's certain things which were considered to be as a legitimate right of the citizens in cities. So the legitimate right, take for example some of the utilities which in political economy we define as use value. Take for example water. Is water a need or a right? So if water is a right, then the state is bound to provide that to its citizens. But well, if it is a need according to the Washington Consensus, then actually there can be a number of players who can intervene, who can come up. So all those arguments came up, and one of the important principles of the 74th Amendment. I'll speak about the good part, but one of the cautious part of the 74th Constitutional Amendment was that the local services should be paid for by the beneficiary and bracket population. So this whole bunch of ideas of user charges, user fees, the cities should become autonomous, functional, was actually also to do with more of that integration of the cities to the world economy. And actually this change or the paradigm shift or the metamorphosis, though I don't call it metamorphosis, I call it the transformation, because metamorphosis is always for good. But according to me, actually it's not happened for the good of people. And actually this transformation is from cities being treated as mere managers to city being treated as entrepreneurs. Now, I come from a political thought and from a lens which views this huge inequity and humongous inequity that has actually developed over the last 3 decades. And I will actually substantiate my point by saying that actually this has happened. There are many reasons to that, but one of the pivotal reason happens to be the way we have developed our cities. And that's why, I mean, what I said in the beginning, take for example, we were discussing about education, water and health, which were considered to be a right. I mean, in my generation, I'm a kind of hybrid in 1990s. I mean, it was considered a right. It is no more considered a right. I just saw, I mean, just this anecdote that I wanted to share. In North India, Navratras are considered to be very auspicious. And all of a sudden we found, I mean, the newspaper advertisements were flooded with advertisements from Amazon, because the products are to be bought. But the moment we had the NEET result out, and the Amazon was out, and we found Baijus, we found Vedantus, found all sorts of educational actually service providers, the kind of, that smart education, I mean, a box kind of material coming up, and the advertisement costs lots and lots. So this transformation that has existed in the cities, from use value to the cities to exchange value. Take, for example, water. I mean, water, which was considered to be a right, now you find user fees, and humongous amount of actually money is getting appropriated. And I just finished reading a book by Samuel Stein called The Capital City. No big wonder. I mean, after of course, post 90s here, but post 1970s in the US, when they were building their cities, city development, and in the city development, real estate development happen to be the principal element of capital accumulation in the cities. So and actually, you don't have to really, bring in philosophers to understand why the balloon of smart cities actually got bursted when the lockdown was announced. Actually, we couldn't hold back our migrant population even for 24 hours, because the inequity is humongous, Joe, let me tell you. I mean, there are several statistics which have come forth, and of course, because of the reasons, because of the way and the manner in which we have developed our cities, and of course the utilities that I'm talking about, what I call this transformation from managerial to entrepreneurs to actually city privatization of the assets. The 10% top asset holders and the 10% top bottom asset holders in rural India, the difference is 500 times, but in cities, Joe, it's 50,000 times. How could you actually imagine? I mean, such a phenomenal kind of inequity existing, and still expecting people to stay back when the lockdown was on. Actually, they have no assets. Neither they had employment, no jobs, no housing, and actually they migrated back. And we have seen captions and captions coming up. They said, we will live with salt, but we will not come back to the cities. Reverse migration is something we have witnessed. Now, so why I'm building this perspective is because when we developed our 74th Constitutional Amendment, when we actually brought in the 74th Constitutional Amendment, actually some of the critics said, hey, it's a dead horse. Though I don't completely buy this argument, and they said actually it was meant to actually ensure that this trajectory of city development takes place. But take, for example, who plans for whom, what Leo was eloquently placing. Since I have been serving the city for 5 years, name one city, I mean, where one of the important functions of the 74th Amendment happens to be that city planning must be done by the city government. When I say city government, actually there is some element of democratization. I don't say it's fully democratized, because I'm hardly, you find ward sabhas, ward committees, city planning taking place from bottom to top, which should have been one of the important elements of the 74th Amendment. But despite that, I mean, there was some element that you will have elections. So tell me one city after the 74th Amendment, Joe, which plans for itself. I mean, I was surprised to hear some of my colleagues saying that, look, we are planning for. I mean, come on, let's understand. For Delhi, it's the Delhi Development Authority. For Mumbai, it's the Mumbai Development Authority. For Mohali, it's the Greater Mohali Development Authority. For Bangalore, it's the Greater Bangalore Development Authority. And similarly, for Chennai, you have the development authorities. So this transformation has another very important element which brings in inequity quite inherent and ingrained into the city development, is that actually what KCR, I mean, who was instrumental into K.C. Sivaramakrishnan, and K.C. Sivaramakrishnan and I, we were together in one of the committees to review the 74th Constitutional Amendment, where he used to describe, and he used to say, I mean, there's this anecdote that I always share in my discussions. He said, you think you are a deputy mayor and you run the city? In the initial years, I said, yes, I think I do run the city. He said, you're a fool then to believe so that you are running the city. Actually, the cities are run by parastatals or the large, actually consultant-driven plans that come to the cities. And slowly I realized it didn't take much time to understand. And take, for example, I won't jump to the smart city plan right now, but take, for example, you have the city development plans, you have the solar city plan, you have the city sanitation plan, or what the mobility plans that we were discussing. Who are the ones who are preparing these plans? And you have consultants from the multilateral institutions who are coming to your cities. Of course, they have to get it passed, because under the JNU it was quite essential that it will have to be passed through the city governments. So it was kind of, the city, and they said, you don't worry, you just pass this plan. You don't have to look at this plan. Once you pass the plan, we'll get an investor. So, this transformation where the government withdrew from investment, and and it was more of that investor-friendly environment that you have to create in cities, actually has led to a debacle. And this debacle we have seen since long. I mean, it's not now, but
Sir,
of course after.
Can
Sorry?
I tell you the time?
Yes, you. Oh my God, I've not even.
2 more minutes, no problem.
My God, I've not even come to the real issue. So actually, and so in that perspective, I think we have to see the state finance commissions also. And I remember Venkaiah Naidu speaking in, because Shimla got lots of awards, lots of accolades earlier. And he said, you know, how the cities are, and they don't have money. They come to the state government. So the state governments also don't have money. They jump to the central government. The central government also doesn't have the money. So we go to the multilateral institutions. And that's how we run our urban affairs. And these affairs are completely unsubstantiated. And so I think what is important over here is that when we speak about the finance commissions, I mean, it's a pathetic state of affairs, barring 2 states, that's Kerala and Karnataka. If you see, there ought to have been the 5th state commissions. I mean, the state finance commission that should have existed in the states. Just 13 states have the 5th state commission. And what about the recommendations? Nobody even looks at it. And who are the chairpersons? Non-technical people. In fact, in Himachal, there's a very interesting, funny anecdote that we share. The former president of a political party that is ruling our state is the chairperson of the Finance Commission. I don't think who even knows an iota. Now, just look at the average per capita devolution that has taken place. I mean, it's a laughing stock. It's just 635 rupees in 2019-20, and if we minus Karnataka, because Karnataka and Kerala are huge. I mean, almost 6,101, and Kerala was 3,004. So it comes to, I mean, it's not even 500 rupees that we are talking about. And similarly, if the transfers as percent to the GDP that we understand, it's just 1.02%. Karnataka is 3.17% and Kerala 1.5%. Else, it is not even more than 0.7, 0.8%. So what do you expect of these finance commissions where the devolution should have taken place, and where the access to actually taxes and access to revenue should have been been given to the city government, but actually that has not happened. Now, I think what is also important when we speak about the smart cities, I think there's one element which before I just finish, Joe, just allow me to complete that argument. And that is, we've seen how exclusive, I mean, why I say by how exclusive, because the entire plan, I mean, I could have understood that had the smart city plan been for a green city, okay, so you have some investments taking place. Where are the investments taking place? Where is the private capital coming? Name one city. I can tell you dozens and dozens of cities where this is not taking place. It's number one. Number two, I think it's all Internet of Things. I don't mind. I mean, right from here, pressing a button on my mobile, putting off my tap or my electricity at the home. But who pays the cost? Now, take for example, when we were shifting from our conventional meters, because we went for 100% volumetric reading in Himachal, in Simla, when we were there, the cost of a so-called smart meter was 20,000 rupees. And whereas we could buy with the RFID tag for 2,000 rupees. So, that cost is important because it is there where expropriation of capital is taking place. I think there is where we have to guard. We don't mind, I mean, using those gadgets, but actually who owns those gadgets and who owns those command centers? I think that's the second point. And don't forget, I mean, we have the Bloomberg report, we have the Forbes report, which speaks it's $19 trillion industry. So I think it's a question of what kind of ecosystem are we building up in these smart cities. And as far as governance is concerned, I have not followed still how they are managing in Chennai, because I heard Dr. Chandra Mohan speaking about that. But let me tell you, I mean, KC Savaramakrishnan, again, I bring him back to the fourth. He used to say, what is a smart city SPV governance model? He said, it's like writing an obituary of the 74th constitutional amendment. So forget about the state finance commissions. I mean, state finance commissions come after the 74th amendment. So actually, it's virtually an obituary. Why? Because none of the elected representatives are part of the SPVs. And we've seen this tussle and this contradiction developing in many of even the ruling party cities, confronting the mayor, confronting the CEO, and the CEO. Then we have some other. So I think that's what. The last part, I think the question of permanent cadres, and that is one of the important Transfer of funds, functionaries, and functions. I mean, that's the three important F's that we used to speak about when we speak about these finance commissions. I mean, where are those functionaries? I mean, similar, I'm telling you, I mean, the person whom we had trained and then he again came back is now a deputy commissioner of some district. I mean, so, a new person will take over who will not even know an iota of urban governance. So I think that is also something very important. But the point is, Joe, I mean, lastly, I think this is a completely unsustainable model. This is an unsustainable model, A, because of the economy that I spoke about, B, because of the processes of alienation that it has brought in. I mean, there's no participatory governance. I mean, forget about it. I've written the smart city plan for Simla, not because I'm a great fan of the smart city, but because we were cheated and we went to the high court, we got it back. And so I know how those plans are written. But the point is, there is hardly any participatory governance and accountability attached to it. I think, and with that, who will own it? I mean, soon you'll find, that's why you have a Rajya Sabha, a reply in the Rajya Sabha given that only 12% of the money has been offloaded. And why would a private capital come to a city where there's no chance of getting dividends out of it? So I think it's a real paralysis that we're talking about. And this form is completely unsustainable. We've seen how it affects the people. We've seen, I think we have to speak more about livable cities. I mean, more about livable cities where we can actually transcend from all those, that paranoia notions that we have about smart cities and forget talking about, I mean, you can't match Shimla, by the way. Shimla is one of the oldest municipalities of our country, dates back to 1851. We have one of the finest infrastructures that were built by the British. So I mean, how can you expect Shimla to be matched by some other small town coming up in Himachal Pradesh, or for that matter, in any mountain or hilly state? So with that, I think, Joe, I do not know whether I've been able to do any justice to the topic, but yeah.
Thank you very much.
But yeah,
thank you very much. It was very powerful. I want to kind of really mention the two things that you said, that Smart City Mission is writing obituary to the 74th Amendment. It was very powerful statement. And also you saying that it's unsustainable from multiple angles, it's unsustainable. Those two are very powerful two messages that you kind of communicated. You did, mention many other things, but this really kind of stood out is what I thought. And also coming from an experience of inside information and being a participant in the whole process and telling about the learnings that you have through the process, that was very, very useful. Bhargavi, are you ready for the presentation now?
Yeah, Joe. So I've shared my PPT with Leo. He will share it. I have some technical issue out here.
Okay. No problem. Yeah, it's now done. Could you switch off the annotation also, Leo? Okay, you can start, Bhargavi. You can do probably.
Thank you so much. So here's a quick story of Tumkur. Tumkur is a city just outside of Bangalore, about 70 kilometers away from Bangalore. And it's at the foothills of a very beautiful hill called the Devrayana Durga Hill. And it has a lot of history. It has been ruled by many dynasties. Many inscriptions have been found here, and there are a whole lot of temples and other things which tell stories about all the kingdoms that rule this. The Mysore Wadeyars are supposed to have, founded this little city. A particular king by name Kante Arasu is credited for founding it, and of course the British added to it. What is important in the context of our story is it's very close to this, the Jayamangali Black Buck Reserve, which is the only reserve which is notified for this black bucks. And the black bucks live here, and in northern Karnataka, it forms a corridor for this particular species. So it's very important in the context of this wildlife. Then talking about the city itself, the city is the headquarters of the Tumkur district, and it has a whole lot of industries in the 80s and 90s, and today it has about 25 odd large-scale industries and a whole bunch of small and medium industries. And it's also a big knowledge hub because it has many engineering colleges, polytechnics, and medical colleges as well. The city itself got its corporation status only in 2010. The population of the city is just about 3 lakh odd. And in 2015, it got selected to be an industrial smart city. So if you see the Tumkuru Smart City project, you will see that there are a whole lot of programs that have been pushed through under the area-based development programs. And these area-based development programs are spread in 7 wards of the city. The city itself has about 35 wards, but only 7 wards are enjoying these area-based development projects. And then there are the Pan City projects, which is a whole lot of technology-based integrated city management control, under which there is also the water network, the intelligent traffic and transport management, surveillance and emergency response systems, and also environmental monitoring. But what is very important is if you go through the smart city proposal itself, if you go through the SWOT analysis that this proposal gives, if you read the weaknesses, the threats, and the strengths and opportunities, a few things are very striking. So under the weakness, you will read this line which I have highlighted. It says the area is highly unorganized with an incomplete pedestrian network, footpaths and roads encroached by hawkers. So this kind of a language is very disturbing because what are we trying to say? So smart cities are not meant for hawkers. Then if you read the threats, it says the city has seen an increase in migrant population, which has resulted in several squatter settlements. There also exists a large number of street vendors who encroach on footpaths and carriageways within the city. So the smart city is talking to a certain class of people. And when we say this part of the city is unorganized and it's haphazard, Indian cities have always been like that. They've always been very vibrant. And in a chaotic space like that, the smart city is trying to bring in order, and order for a particular class of people. The next thing that I would like to draw your attention to is if you go to the 6th slide where it talks about citizen engagement. And again, if you see what kind of consultation has happened, what kind of citizen engagement has happened, it is largely through the smartphones and technology-based engagements. So, for example, suggestion drop boxes. And it is supposed to have collected 17 vision statements. So who are these people? Who are these groups of people who could have given the 17 vision statements? The door-to-door survey, it says door hits 35,000, but responses are only 16,000. Then technology fair. Who gets to go to these technology fairs? Print media, then radio, social media. If you see the Facebook likes and Twitter interactions. So if we are going to consider this as engagement, it certainly is very disturbing. Then WhatsApp through 600 groups and website views, mobile bulk where messages were sent, this many messages were sent for awareness and competitions. So if you move to the next slide, Tumkur city is also home to 23 slums. Do any of these people ever get to participate in the kind of citizen engagement that we just saw? Do these people have access to any of those social medias or technology fairs is a question that we need to ask. So these people are obviously left out of that kind of a consultation. I will just touch upon 3 ongoing projects in Tumkur. So on slide 8, there is an example of a so-called intelligent traffic and transport management where bus stands are being created. So these bus stations are supposed to be help through technology with the display boards, giving details of which bus is arriving when, where are these route numbers going. But these obviously are not functioning right now. What is very interesting is in 2013, the Department of Urban Land Transport itself had done a very thorough survey of the commuters and has published a report which very clearly identifies the challenges in the mobility plans of the city, the kind of facilities the citizens have actually highlighted. Whether the smart city plan has connected with this is something that remains unanswered. Whether these kind of recommendations are even taken on board is something that remains very doubtful. Then if we move on to the next slide, it is about the water network and the rejuvenation of a particular lake. This is one of the largest lakes in Tumkur. It ranges to about 481 acres. If you see the Google images over the last, the 3 years that I have captured, you can see how it has changed from 2004 to 2020. The entire watershed area has changed. There is a lot more construction in the area. And if you go to slide 10, so as part of the Smart City project, this entire lake has seen a facelift. So there is a lounge, there is a glass house, there are walking paths, there is something called a Kalyani, which we refer to in the Indian vernacular languages. It's like a step well at the entrance of the lake, and a whole lot of other things that are happening around the lake. What is in question is, there is a judgment from 2012 of the Karnataka High Court, which very clearly mandates what needs to be done if a lake is rejuvenated, and how to rejuvenate lakes is based on a committee report, the N.K. Patil committee report. If you read that and see what is happening here, obviously the no development zone of 30 meters around the lake seems to have been violated. And there are buildings all around the lake. Again, it seems to have been violated. So the smart city projects don't seem to be taking what is happening on ground with reality, with the courts, with the various agencies, and what the people want. And the next slide will talk a little bit about the smart waste management. So under the smart waste management, it proposes to build a landfill in this little village called the Ajagondanahalli. And it is in this very village 4 years back, there was a huge protest, somebody lost their life. And if we look at the other problems in and around the waste management issue, the solid waste workers have not been paid. There's always delayed payment. And Tumkur district is well known for its highest numbers of manual scavengers in the country today. Manual scavenging has been banned, but because of delayed payments in the various talukas, including Tumkur city, these people are forced to go and get into the soak pits to clean them up. And many have lost their lives. And then there's illegal dumping of hazardous waste, not just municipal solid waste, but hazardous waste, which is interstate waste that comes into Tumkur and it is illegally dumped. There is a down-to-earth report on this as well. And if you look at all this, there's also a Controller and Auditor General's performance audit where they have pulled out many of the cities for not preparing a DPR. And this was actually tabled in the assembly. So the smart city programs don't seem to be taking into account all that is happening around everywhere. So going to the last question, this only leaves us with many more questions. So when we are spending so much money on city beautification projects, without people's participation, and again, when we say people's participation, what kind of people are being involved is very important. And what's really worrying is about the consequences of the rampant industrialization and urbanization taking place in Tumkur. there are a range of industries coming in and around Tumkur. There are many parts of the entire district which have been declared as special zones for industry itself. About 10,500 acres have been given to develop helicopters. There is another range of industries which are catering to the renewable energy today. And the Tumkur Smart City company boasts of having a renewable energy project very close to it, which is the Pavagada project, where about 2,000 megawatts of solar energy is being generated. And Tumkur is also becoming a site where solar panels are being manufactured, windmill blades are being manufactured. So a whole range of industries are getting clearances. And if we are talking about pollution, and if you go back to the SWOT analysis, one of the threats that it highlights is that there is increased pollution and there is a need to protect the environment of Tumkur. But if such kind of clearances are being given, and in the name of smart city, a whole lot of such beautification projects are also happening, it certainly requires a rethink. Then the extensive transformation of the rural hinterland, which is displacing the livelihood spaces of many of the pastoral communities and the agrarian communities. And of course, the emphasis on all the technology-based solutions that are being promoted, when basic features of urban planning are largely missing. And the promotion of SPVs, everybody has addressed, is we have more than enough parastatals in the country today. Every city has new parastatals that are being created. And on top of it, we are getting more and more of these SPVs, making the provisions under the 74th Amendment redundant. So I will leave you with these questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bhargavi. I mean, after we hearing from Ram about what this meant to Imphal Smart City, here is another story from the ground. What actually does it mean on the ground? I mean, behind all the deceptive lingo and the glitter and the advertisement, what exactly does the smart city do on the ground? You were able to kind of picture that very clearly. As Manoj Narayan rightly says, Bhargavi's presentation is another nail on the coffin of smart city concept. You mentioned about slums being left out. I mean, we also hear from other cities like Indore and Bhopal that the slums are being demolished, so that, I mean, they have been kind of looked as a less smart thing in the vicinity of a smart city. We're running behind the schedule, I know. I mean, I would quickly move on to our last speaker, Nile Kress, to speak about the Germany's experience with Smart City program. Nile studied environmental and sustainability studies with a focus on political science in Germany, Netherlands, and Sweden. She's currently working with the Helmholtz Center for Environment Research in Germany on the research project Governance of Socio-Technical Transformations. There she critically examines how the smart city is envisioned, legitimized, and enacted as a path to a sustainable urban future in Germany. Over to you, Nele.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe, and also many thanks for Bhargavi and Leo for setting this up. Thanks a lot for letting me speak here as well. I was asked by Bhargavi and Leo if I could reflect of some similarities and differences to the German experience of smart cities in relation to what we just heard. So I trained my multitasking skills and put up some pictures together while listening to your interesting talks and trying to figure out how to compare this. And I hope I can split my screen now. This sometimes doesn't work, but I hope it does now. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
So what I figured is quite similar from what we just heard to the German case is that we have this corporate-led and globalized vision of the smart city, which spreads the world and spreads all over the world. And so we have this vision coming from the Silicon Valley, and trying to see cities as the new markets, to set up their technological devices and make money. And so we see here on the left-hand side some pictures of typical public-private partnerships. On the top, you see the city of Wolfsburg and the Volkswagen Group, who partnered up to set up the smart city Wolfsburg. And on the bottom, you see the city of Hamburg partnering up with Cisco Systems to set up the smart harbor in Hamburg. So this is also very essential to the German smart city case, and a lot of already implemented smart city experiences. And then on the right-hand side, you also see these pictures that you can see all over the world. It's from the official site website of the responsible Federal Ministry of the Interior. And yeah, on the top, you even see, I even saw that this is not actually a German city that they show. So it's really this idea of connectivity and all these, same cities all over the world who have like these lights and straight lines, and really bringing together this idea of that cities are manageable and can be optimized and made more efficient through technology. And we already heard this, and this is also the same in Germany, that we have this idea, this basic idea of solutionism. So that technology can actually solve all kind of urban problems. And as Bhargavi and some others already showed us, that on the ground this often looks very different. And that's also what I find similarities with the German case is the critique that we have on these, and this very justified critique that we have in Germany, is that a lot of specific groups are marginalized, and it really focuses on more affluent groups of the population, and some others are really marginalized. And also with the citizen engagement, a lot of projects on the ground show that like these participatory processes are all about acceptance, and not actually a lot about like real participation. So it's really about like people should accept the technology implemented. And what Bhargavi also talked about, the critique towards the part of the environmental sustainability, which is also the case for Germany, that here we only see that like environmental sustainability is understood as increasing energy and resource efficiency, and while like protecting green spaces also is actually not a big thing. And what I also find interesting, maybe to mention, that there is a lot of similarity with what Ram said, that because you probably all know that Germany is a very car-friendly country with a lot of car industry. And so, there's not at all this option of a better mobility could be better with less cars. It's more about like having smart parking systems and making the traffic more efficient and stuff like that. So I found interesting that this is also a bit similar. Now I will have a look if I forgot anything. So what I found a bit different is that we don't have such thing as a smart city mission on the national level. So it's not like this top-down process that it was said like we need to have 100 smart cities in Germany. It was more like a bottom-up process, not in terms of like a grassroots thing, but more like the cities themselves have a lot of responsibilities or like a lot of autonomy in the federal system of Germany. And so there was explicitly no strategy to implement smart cities. However, and this is the picture here on the left-hand side, on the national level, or like actually, yeah, on this whole slide I put up there, on the national level in the last years, the Federal Ministry for the Interior set up a format called Smart City Dialogue, and this dialogue is really about an ethical debate about the risks that are connected to smart cities and how we can solve them and improve the potentials and stuff like that. And so in the end of this process, there was the Smart City Charter that you can see there. And so this, what's in there is it's most about like digital transformation must be aligned to sustainable development and European values. And this is probably, or what I heard, at least what I heard so far, this is not in the center of the smart mission in India. So really focusing on how digital transformation can be more sustainable. Well, I hope I got it right, at least. And yeah, and this Smart City Charter has some guiding principles and recommendations for the local level. What else? Sorry, I didn't prepare like a talk. I just tried to see what you were saying to react to this. So just looking through my notes. So what's probably also particular that you have this consensus seeking or consensus based approach and governance that is like following the logic of experimentation a lot. So we have a lot of different so-called model cities all over Germany. That's probably actually quite similar to India then, where a lot of different anecdotal incremental changes have been happening, but it's not like having a whole mission about it. And yeah, and actually, so comparing to what you see here on the right hand side, this is actually what a smart city in Germany looks like, seeing this picture. So it's not like all these lights and stuff. It's more like we have these historically grown cities and we have the built environment, and there are some small projects like implemented and infrastructures implemented in this in these built environments. So it's not so much about greenfield development in Germany. And just for the end, I wanted to show you something. I'm not sure if that's also a big thing in India, but probably that's also still interesting. So in contrast to the beginning where I showed like this public-private partnerships, there's might be also quite particular to the German case that we have a pretty strong civic tech community, and they are especially loud in Berlin, but also in other cities. And here you see some examples with ideas they came up with. And Berlin signed the Declaration of the City's Coalition for Digital Rights. As you can see that on the left-hand side on the top, with some principles like equal access to the internet, privacy and data protection, transparency, participatory democracy, and so on. And there's a civic tech activists group or alliance called Digital City Berlin. And they claim for instance, a roundtable. You see these chairs here. A roundtable for digital policy in Berlin, so that really like all urban actors come together debating about what's good and what's not good in order to implement it in Berlin or not implement it. And yeah, they strongly claim for the involvement of civil society organizations in that, because they are usually also marginalized or not included or excluded from these these processes. And also you see that on the right-hand side, they claim for neighborhood labs, which is maybe also a nice idea. So it's really this hybrid form that you have analog and digital forms of creating the future of the city together. And this is really based on in the different city neighborhoods. So it's not like one lab for all, but in the districts where people can go and talk about how the future of the city should look like and how they can implement it together. And then also on the bottom you see Autocracy Plus. That's an example for digital participation formats that are open and free, so that everyone can use it free of charge, and they give trainings and try to make this as inclusive as possible. And yeah, so that's actually basically it already. Yeah.
Thank you, Nele. I mean, these projects, Smart City is one of those projects, but these programs are promoted and implemented in India, saying that these are all successful programs abroad. So in that context, it was really good to kind of hear the experiences in Germany, whether, similarities or differences. Both, it was kind of good to kind of learn from you about the same thing in Germany. Thank you very much. We will go for questions and answers now, but before that, I would request Prakash Kaswan, to make a brief intervention about the inequality in the smart cities. Prakash, can you make a brief intervention?
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, CFA and Joe, for organizing this. And thank you all the participants for your really insightful talks. I speak based on about 3 years of engagement that I've had with the topic of smart cities, both in terms of policy kind of analysis, but also field research, including with local governments in Jaipur, Bhopal, and Indore. And so, as Joe said, I really appreciated some of the articulations about how smart city really is sort of the obituary or the nail in the coffin of 74th Amendment. But the point that I wanted to make is that I think sometimes we risk, and this is more for those who are new to sort of the study of power and in the context of neoliberalism. Sometimes it seems as if we can sort of get carried away by thinking of capitalism and neoliberalism as purely a top-down structuralist process. And the way it actually operates in practice is through creation of incentives, perverse incentives for local actors. So I think while it is obituary in a sense, it's like the Ajit joke, they're going to keep flowing the oxygen so that the local government somehow are not able to get out of it. They remain sort of an hesitant supporter of these changes. And the power of the central government in the Indian context is extremely important to think about, because they can push any of these projects through muscle and all of that. And so I think what we need to do is to sort of focus centrally on this argument about the main intent of the smart city project. It came out in all of the presentations that were done, especially by Bhargavi, that there's no doubt that this is an elite project explicitly targeted for redesigning cities for the middle class and for the upper middle classes. And so when we say, for example, and I think Tikendra is right, that who will be interested in investing in smart cities? That's true for 90, maybe even 80% of Indian cities, but the largest cities and the most growing cities, the investors are already staking their share in the process, and they are already cornering the accumulations out of the real estate development and other processes of industrial development. So I think we need to be looking at how these processes are being handled through these special purpose vehicles, and what kind of platforms can be provided for local governments who are already very concerned. So, in my discussions with elected officials or even some of the very senior urban planning professionals who are part of the local government bodies, they're really very concerned, but they don't seem to have a way of articulating their concerns. So I think, in many cases, local government officials can be our partner, but we have to find a smart political strategy to try and create a platform or some way in which the local government officials can voice their concerns and can be part of the resistance in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prakash. I mean, that was a very useful and brief intervention. We will go for the questions now. I will read out a couple of questions which has come, just to save time asking all the questions together. The first one is to Leo. Mr. Vasan Mysurmat, he's asking, where do the ward committees fit in the smart cities concept? The second from Joseph Anthony, asking, what does the current smart city initiative do to support bottom-up initiatives apart from consultation? And he's also asking, since you touched upon the carbon credit system, is there any move to support carbon credit system?
All three questions for me?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. I'll definitely answer the first two. The point is this, ward committees don't have a role in the way in which the smart city project has been configured. That's very clear right from the very beginning. And I say this because when Tikender said an obituary was written for the 74th Amendment, the Karnataka High Court, for instance, passed series of orders to make the ward committees function. So I'm not so sure if it's an obituary yet. It's probably putting the institutional matrix which came out from the 74th Amendment in coma, certainly. And one needs to go to court to bring them back to activity. And that movement is taking place across the city of Bangalore, and I know it is happening in Bangalore, it's happening elsewhere. So it's kind of inspired by the fact that, for instance, we argued that you cannot solve the waste or water problem unless you have decentralization, nor can you solve the traffic problem, nor can you ensure housing for the poor unless you have ward committees which are truly representative of the people, who actually look at the budgets and accounting. And in the constitution, there is also the idea of making the ward level schemes, which in turn become the city plan. So the smart city is therefore a blatant argument against all of this. And I'm not saying that. It's the text of the smart city mission which says that they do not regard the ward committees at all as a partner in the process. Now, one can imagine that, the government of India could have said, look, we want some good projects going, inclusive projects going. So why don't we actually activate all the ward committees across the country, in all the cities, like the Panchayat Raj movement, for instance, in the 80s in some states and across India in 90s did. Water security was heightened after the panchayats came alive. The promise was there in the constitution, but it's only when the panchayats became alive that water security became real. And if you take the case of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, for instance, it's the active, the capacity of people to be actively engaged in decision making that brought health and food security. So I don't think can be an argument to say that corporates and the central government know better than what people want, and that's empirically laid out quite well in multiple studies across the world. That's the answer to the first question. The second question, Joe, just quickly, if I may ask, what I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, I can't hear you, Joe.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What does the current smart city initiative do to support bottom-up initiatives apart from consultation?
Yeah, so I don't want to take away your time in terms of sharing the screen and all that. It's a little clunky doing it on Zoom, but let me put it this way. If you go and take the smart city document of Bangalore, Bhargavi showed Tumkur, Ram spoke of Imphal, Tikender of Shimla, across the country, and of course Chandramohan, my good friend, has spoken eloquently about Chennai. But if you look at the text in Bangalore, the consultation is really limited to BPAC, Praja, and I think it's Janagra. Now, these are all middle class formulations. They're not local government institutions. They are civil society networks. And I've always held the view that while civil society has a role in influencing change, civil society does not necessarily represent statutorily people. So the locus of statutory representation lies within the ward committees and the council. Therefore, the smart city projects do not actually allow for the representative democracy to function. So I hope that addresses how smart cities work in operational terms. And the third question of climate change,
Carbon credit system.
And the carbon credit systems. I'm sure that if you go into the details, there is always this packaging that does work in favor of those who know how to game the carbon credit idea. But if you actually look at it from the point of view of local projects, a good way to examine them is to go to the Facebook page of the Smart City Mission. And everyone talks about climate change and carbon credits and securing it and so on. But if you look at the projects don't necessarily have a very critical evaluation of the net savings in terms of the, let's say, fossil fuel shift that has taken place away from what was the norm. So I think it's in the details that we have the problem. There are no details. There is a promise, and there is the text which is laid out as an agreement, and then there is nothing. So my problem with the with carbon credits has always been that who is watching what, and nobody is able to watch anything at all. And so a lot of money gets moved around without really securing the so-called benefits that were meant to be post IPCC agreements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think we must move away from that paradigm, that somewhere along the way, the world has somehow managed to bring together a credit system in which our climate change situation will be resolved. I think that's a big lie which we have been told for the last decade. And the quicker we move out of it, it's better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Dr. Chandramohan, there are a few questions. I will just kind of club a couple of questions together. One is, Maju is asking, is creating islands of models a regression from a whole city approach under JNUR? And the second thing he's asking that, how do convergence like Amrita and housing for the poor work in smart cities? How do we address the issues of affordable housing for the poor?
Yeah.
Dr. Chandramohan? Yeah.
Thank you for those 3 questions. What was the first question?
Is creating islands of models a regression from a whole city approach under JNUR?
Fair enough, fair enough. I got that. Urban development is a big challenge. There was this discussion at the time of formulation of this scheme as to whether you need to do it in a small area or you should do something small for the whole city or something big for a small part of it. There is really no final answer to that. A city like Chennai, if there has to be an impact at a large scale, requires thousands of crores. 1,000 crores over 5 years perhaps will not be able to do justice to a city like Chennai or Bangalore. So the project formulation time, the project was formulated in such a way that it had both components, and it was felt that the small demonstration which would happen of a particular area-based approach for a small project would actually be some kind of a torchlight which could then be scaled up for the rest of the city. That was the intention of this small area-based approach, where you could test out something very different and something pioneering. At the same time, when you raise expectations of people, especially in a large city, you say smart city is happening, and then you concentrate a certain initiative in a certain small segment, there is a possibility, and there is a very real possibility, that people will get disappointed in the rest of the city. So it needed to be a mix of pan-city initiatives and also a smaller area-based approach. So that's how Chennai actually, I mean, that is part of the scheme guidelines also. So every city has one or two area-based approaches, and it also has many pan-city interventions. So similar approach even Chennai has taken. So it is not an either or situation, but it is an and situation. You do that, you do this also. What is the second question?
How do convergence like Amrit and housing for the poor work in smart cities? How do
Yeah.
we address the issues of affordable housing for the poor?
Yes, thank you so much. This is a very important question. Amrit is that way a true inheritor of the JNNURM legacy, where you could have access to certain funds for infrastructure purposes without necessarily falling into the framework of the smart city. There are many places, especially in a smart city, where there are gaps in infrastructure which could not be funded through the smart city. Supposing you have a new addition to the city which has requirement for water and sewerage supply networks, then that Amrit would fund. So basically, Amrit and smart city projects have been designed to complement each other so that wherever there are gaps in infrastructure, Amrit steps in. Wherever there is scope for using technology to improve services, smart city provides that. The second part of it, you spoke about housing. Housing basically for the city of Chennai and for the state of Tamil Nadu is not necessarily a smart city intervention. For people in the cities across Tamil Nadu and in Chennai, Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board has been having an in situ development model for a long time. So many people, it came under different names at different points in time, but many people have been permitted and also actively engaged with to go in for housing in situ development. In the smart city, strictly speaking, these initiatives have been further given a fillip. What further has happened is again outside the smart city ambit, but it's something which is basically going into this city at the same time. We have lots of migrant laborers who come into the city, live in very poor housing conditions, and often have no access to good housing. For this, the Construction Workers Welfare Board has come up with something which is now a national policy. And that is temporary accommodation in various places where there is large construction activity have been built. These are places where for a nominal amount, construction labor can come and stay for the night and for the long period of time. So for migrant labor, housing has been addressed. For people who are in slums, slum redevelopment has been taking place over a long period of time. And of course, where there are water bodies which have been encroached, this is a very difficult choice to make. You encroach water bodies, there it is not allowed to go in for in situ development. There they have actually shifted these people to another place, but provided them proper housing and other facilities. So Chennai follows a combination of both in situ and ex situ development. Ex situ development being limited to places like water bodies which have been under encroachment. So whenever there is restoration of the water body that is happening, this approach is followed. What is the other question?
Thank you. I'm avoiding all the comments because of the time factor. Mr. Swaminathan is asking, in this technology and capital intensive schemes, what is the role of people, the main stakeholders?
That's a very broad question. The whole purpose of the using technology is basically to provide better services for people. And as Leo was mentioning, India was designed to be a representative democracy, not necessarily a participative democracy. However, in the Smart City program, there have been avenues made available for a participative democracy. And the model which Tamil Nadu follows the smart cities are now part of the local body, so they are accountable to the representative democracy also. So to that extent, that contradiction, apparent or alleged contradiction, has been addressed in the Tamil Nadu context.
John has a question: who is responsible for managing these completed projects, the corporation or the Smart City Limited?
Basically, there are different types of projects. So if it is something which is pan city and which is, and let me also tell you, as was supposed to be, PAN's smart city project is only has a kitty of about 1,000 crores. But what has happened in the smart city framework in the city by leveraging funds from the state government, from the local body, and from other multilateral institutions is much more than that. So almost all the assets that are created under various factions are managed by the agencies themselves. For example, if you have a smart classroom in a corporation, it is managed by the corporation. If you have an integrated command and control system, that is managed both by Chennai Corporation and the Chennai Police. If we are talking about water body restoration, water bodies in Chennai are owned either by the PWD or the concerned corporation. There are some which the corporation owns, there are some which the PWD owns. So they continue to manage it. If it is the Palikarnai marshland, the forest department actually is managing them. So it is a very, it doesn't necessarily allow itself to be a simple answer. However, in the area-based approach, if there are some assets created, those are currently being managed by the SPV.
One last question to you. What is your proposal for dealing with the ash residues coming out of Ennur thermal power plant?
Unfortunately, I am not currently dealing with that subject. I think the question perhaps is better put to the Energy Department or the Pollution Control Board. I don't deal with both the institutions, so I would not hazard an answer to that question.
Fair enough, but I think that question was also in the larger context of how does this polluting projects around the smart city, when it's affected the smart city, what do you do about it? I mean, but fair enough, we take your answer there. I learned that Mr. Tikandar has to kind of leave. There are many comments for Mr. Tikandar, but no questions. But I would request him to kind of make closing remarks before we leave. I'll also come back to all other speakers also to make closing remarks. But Tikandar, Mr. Tikandar, before you leave, your closing remarks.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, it was really enriching to be part of this discussion. I don't think I really need to add anything more except to really substantiate what I said in the beginning. And that is actually, though I'm actually being indicted or charged of being, building up this theory of conspiracy as far as the urban development is concerned, but I still hold on to my position. Why? For the simple reason, you see, because if you just take two examples. I mean, all those who were there as part of in the process of building the smart city plans. I mean, I don't have to name them because that doesn't look nice. I mean, especially your large companies, your large consultancies, actually have also got a good number of smart city projects. So they are part of. So you can easily correlate. That's one part. And the second part, I mean, why it has to be so people participatory, or what Dr. Chandramohan was saying. I mean, representative. I mean, so I think this whole notion has also been cracked, and the notion of citizenry, civil rights, actually have transformed to a ruler and ruled kind of stuff. This is what we are gauging, especially in the smart cities and the overall city development that is taking place. Now, why I say so? Because because the participatory process has actually been completely either delinked or has been diminished, but two, also because of the fact that large chunk of these projects are, because as I go back to my conspiracy theory, are being ordained or actually developed by these large consultancies, and you'll find small solid waste management, mobility, majority of these projects are actually capital intensive technology. Whether you want that technology or not, actually, so where is this dialogue? Where is this confrontation? Where is this contestation that is taking place? I remember your last, of course I say last every time, but this is the last one. You know, I did my fellowship on urban mobility in Leipzig, and Leipzig is a very interesting city in Germany. Probably they are now moving towards 100% free urban mobility, and they are highly pedestrianized and actually non-motorized bicycle-friendly city. And they were further actually developing in a form that they were reducing and squeezing their lanes, I mean the motorized lanes, to transferring it to the pedestrians and the cyclists. But that's not the paradox. The paradox is that Leipzig sustains its employment, almost 70% of the employment, on the manufacturing of a car called Porsche. I mean, Porsche, as we all know, is one of the largest guzzlers. I don't have to add anything more to that. So I asked this teacher of mine, I said, who are you befooling? I mean, you are creating an infrastructure which is so, the kind of ecosystems that you're creating, so eco-friendly for the people, highly pedestrian. And for whom are you manufacturing these cars for? And the funniest answer that I've got in my life, Joe, is for you. That's for the third world. Just look at your mobility plans all across the cities. I mean, we have actually encroached on the spaces of our citizens. Where is the right of the pedestrian, the cyclist? I mean, the flyovers. Actually, we have induced this large consciousness of amongst the people, and of course amongst the middle class, as Prakash was rightly pointing out. There's a large middle class and the growing interest, and actually the smart cities cater to these interests. I think with that I will. Thank you.
Joe, we can't hear you. Can you repeat everything you said?
I'm so sorry. Since you are leaving early, we also want to take this opportunity to thank you for bringing in very important perspectives, and we really learned a lot from your presentations, and thank you very much. Moving on, I mean, there are a couple of questions to Nele. What are the, Maju is asking that, what are the typical projects in Germany which smart cities take up? And what is the role of big IT companies in the governance of the project?
And Joe, if I can just add, because Tikendra just brought up the question of Leipzig. Nele works in Helmholtz Institute, which is located in Leipzig. So if she can also reflect on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise for me to say that Leipzig is a non-motorized city in his eyes, because in mine it's not at all. But and also the bike infrastructure is very questionable for me if that's actually like a great bike infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, this is probably, it always depends on what you compare it to, for sure. But yeah, I found it interesting that you studied here and had this impression, or your teacher even said so. But yeah, for the other question, it was about who, like, what areas are. Can you repeat it? Sorry.
The role of IT companies in the governance of the project.
The role of IT companies is actually quite big, I would say. So I intended to show or illustrate with pictures in the beginning. All these men there standing together, that cities or city governments often partner up with IT corporations, but also other corporations, as a lot of projects are about mobility in Germany, like smart city projects are about mobility or energy. Then they partner up with these with these international companies. And so I would say they have quite a big of influence. So Cisco Systems or IBM or Siemens, T-Mobile, they're all pretty influential when it comes to these implementation processes, especially because it's about like implementing ICT infrastructure. And these are the companies who have like the means to do this, although there's of course other options to do that and to do this in a more like open source way or so. But most of the cities, yeah, partner up with these companies, I would say.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm not reading the comments. As I said earlier, there are many comments which you might have already seen. I would request the speakers to kind of have their closing remarks, taking 2 to 3 minutes. And can I start with Ram? Ram, are you there?
I think Ram dropped out because of.
No, he's here. He's here.
There? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, could you please unmute yourself, Ram?
Yeah, no, I was supposed to leave, but then I got back just now. No, I think this push for smart cities across is particularly in the small cities that we see in the Northeast, and particularly also among the hill states, needs to be really thought through. And I think people's participation, this whole talk about people's participation needs also to be rethought, and new thinking is required. I think I think longer critical engagement beyond this conversation, I think, needs to be taken forward. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ram. Can I invite Bhargavi now? Bhargavi?
Yeah, Joe. Thank you. So I think more studies of these smart city projects are required, and more engagement and more discussion is the need of the hour, because especially in the tier 2 cities like in Tumkur, unless you engage with people, they think that it's a nice project, especially the lake project. Many people felt that, it's nice that now they can walk around the lake and they have access to, it as a recreational center. But slowly, when you converse with them as to how a lake should be, how it was in the past, and get into a conversation, then they see what is happening. So a lot more engagement with people is very much needed in the context of smart cities, to help them wake up to what this whole thing is about, how the whole thing is actually taking away their rights to participation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bhargavi. Can I request Dr. Andra Mohan? Could you make your concluding remarks, sir? Closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was wonderful hearing these conversations. All that I want to say is that from being the first municipal body in the country to one of the 4 metropolitan cities, Chennai has had a long journey. I'm sure every city has a similar journey. Over a period of time, things have changed, things have improved, and definitely, I'm sure things are better than they were before. But this is something which is work in progress. Nobody can say that this is the one thing that is the best for everybody. A participatory process, an inclusive process, which takes on board interests, needs, and also views of different stakeholders, and then tries to build a consensus and take it forward, is perhaps the best way to go forward. Many years ago, one of my professors said something which I would like to recollect. It was said in the context of people, but today I would like to use it in the context of cities. He said, and I quote, "To exist is to change. To exist is to change. To change is to mature. To change is to mature. And to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly." So This is what I want to leave you with. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandramohan. Nile, can I request you to have your concluding remarks?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot again for this interesting conversation. And yeah, what I would say is it's just really important to keep on talking about this, to open up the black box of the smart city and talk about what's behind it, and make urbanization more deliberate and attach it to socio-ecological needs and to ecological transformation. I think that's the basic thing that's always important to keep in mind, and it's not about implementing the smart city. Maybe we need other concepts actually than the smart city, but really looking at what are the problems, what are the actual problems, listen to the people who know about these problems, and then see whether smart solutions could be part of the solution, but not the only solution.
Thank you, Nile. Leo always likes to have the last word. Leo.
Thank you. I would like to share my mild disagreement with my good friend Chandramohan about his interpretation of representative democracy versus participatory democracy. My understanding of representative democracy is inclusive of participative democracy, because without the participative democracy, representation is, the simple word for that is nonsense. I say this because we had these arguments in the 19th century when Mayo, for instance, post the crown taking over this region, came up with this doctrine that efficiency is everything in governance. And that came to be called the Mayo Doctrine, and most of the country is being run along those lines. But Ripon, who came later, about a decade later, realized that unless you ensure there are fundamental freedoms, such efficiency may seem like it works in the short term, but in the long term it doesn't. And so, for instance, one of the first reforms that Ripon came up with is the freedom that he extended to the vernacular press, which was being repressed. Today we are seeing the opposite of it. The press in general is being repressed, except exceptions who speak for the establishment. He also was the one who set up the Factories Act. He got the Factories Act enacted. He abolished child labor in industry. So there were a lot of reformist moves that happened as a part of Ripon's doctrine. And essentially, the freedom movement was an outcome of the Ripon doctrine, I can argue. Because most of our leaders who emerged in the freedom movement were municipal leaders. Tamil Nadu is a great, Chennai, I wouldn't say Tamil Nadu, Chennai is a great example. The Madras presidency, for instance, has thrown up so many stalwarts in India's freedom movement. And I think that's the quality of local democracy that I am speaking to when I speak about representative democracy. And what I find in the smart city is that there is no scope for any of this. So to me, this is a very frightening prospect that we are comfortable with a certain set of so-called high-tech. For me, to have app-based transport is not so high-tech. For me, a street vendor is very high-tech without any app because their networks are amazing. I have studied them. As is the the person who is earning his or her livelihood by the fruit of their labors. Most of the urban poor do that. Their networks are amazing. They don't rely on technologies like we do. Yet they're one of the most efficient people I've seen. And I think the future city has to be really nurturing and compassionate and progressive in the sense that anyone who comes from those families has as much of a chance of making it as would be somebody who comes from a middle class or upper middle class or the rich. So that's the kind of inclusivity I think the Constitution speaks to in the Article 39. And we have a long way to go to get there.
Thank you very much, Leo. Before I hand it over to my...
No, Chandramohan has hand up, so I just
Sure, please. You need to unmute, sir. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
I know Leo for mostly 30, 35 years. And I can say with some certainty that I understand what he says. But unfortunately, in this context, I'm not able to say the same thing about what he said about me. Wrong extrapolations of right positions often lead to wrong conclusions. So what I was saying was that smart cities do provide for some amount of representative and participatory democracies. I was not on the theoretical construct of whether they were different or not. So what my statement was but supportive, not divisive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chandramohan, for that clarification. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chandramohan. Before I hand over the forum to my colleague Tanny, I just want to kind of say that it was a very enriching experience to kind of hear all of you. Diverse kind of experiences and perspectives came on board, and I'm sure that all participants benefited from this conversation as I have done. I think if I take one thing away from this conversation is to kind of have more conversations, and especially with diverse opinions and perspectives, we need to kind of have such more conversations happening. Tani would give the formal word of thanks, but I want to personally thank each speaker for keeping the time, bringing in such enormous wealth of experience and perspectives, and also all the participants who raised the questions, commented, and got involved. And I'm sorry that I could not kind of take all questions because of the time factor. Thank you, and over to you, Tani. You need to unmute.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Taking forward from Joe. I will not take many minutes, just a couple of minutes. Let me quickly borrow a couple of lines from the concept note shared earlier. To demonstrate feasible choices among alternative pathways, to enact socially progressive transformations towards sustainability, to produce insights of immediate practical importance, to show how much transformations can best be governed in each selected area, by whom, to what ends, by what means, and with what welfare consequences for affected groups. I'm sure all of you would agree with me that this session has been indeed a critical of that of the grassroots, the academia, the governing, the executing, the thinkers, the planners, the creative, and the curious, with a critical look into the smart city concept, text, narratives, documents like Leo shared, and with profound stories of participatory governance, democracy, and accountability, or the lack of it, from Chennai, Imphal, Shimla, Ajmer, Tumkur, and Germany. And this was certainly a genuine effort towards making sense of how collective imaginaries, visions of future, and imaginations of transformations, like stated in the concept note, could help shape societal choices and that of all of ours. On behalf of all the organizers, Environmental Support Group Bangalore and Center for Financial Accountability New Delhi, let me extend our warm gratitude to all those who attended this session, the attendees, the participants, the listeners, the viewers, and the audience across all platforms, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, across different parts of the globe, for your overwhelming interest, curiosity, responses, and participation today. A big thank you to all the eminent speakers of today, Dr. Chandramohan IAS, Leo Saldana, Tikendra Singh Pawar, Bhargavi S. Rao, Nele Kress, and Ram Vangirakpam, and of course, our moderator who tightly held this session, Joe Atyali. Thank you to Program for Science, Technology, and Society, Harvard Kennedy School, USA, and Elmhorn's Center for Environmental Research, Germany, for collaborating and having facilitated such a dialogue across the global North and South as part of the Governance of Socio-Technological Transformation Project. Some of us have just started the day. Some of us have already reached midday, while some of us, here would be sleeping over the thoughts with much more to ponder upon. Please do not forget to join us And do invite your fraternity, friends, family, colleagues for the second and the final session of the same series next week, Thursday, on the 19th November at the same time. We will be interrogating together on the financial implications of such smart city missions. Our next batch of interesting speakers would be Professor Sheila Jasnoff, Madhivadan IAS, Ravikant Joshi, Sitaram Shelar, Marina Joseph, and Gaurav Dwivedi, who would be moderating the session. We'll be sending you an email again with all the details of, with the link, the participants, the sessions, and the detailed bios of the speakers. Meanwhile, stay safe. Wishing you all the best of health. Good day, good night. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chandramohan.
Thanks.
Nele, Ram, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bhargavi, yeah, thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.